medical. Just give me a second. There you go. This program is hosted by EHPN, Eritrean Healthcare Professional Network. My name is Luam, and I am a public health registered nurse. I do have our guest speaker today, Haben Girma. She is the first deafblind person to graduate from Harvard Law School. Haben is a human rights lawyer advancing disability justice. President Obama named her a White House Champion of Change. She received a Helen Keller Achievement Award, a spot on Forbes 30 Under 30, and Time 100 Talks. President Clinton, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Chancellor Angela Merkel had all honored Haben. Haben believes disability is an opportunity for innovation, and she teaches organizations the importance of choosing inclusion. The New York Times, Oprah Magazine, and Today's Show features her memoir, Haben, the deafblind woman who conquered Harvard Law School. And there is a lot more to it, and you guys can go ahead and research her. I am actually very fascinated in all the accomplishments as an Eritrean American. I am so happy to have her here. I'm just going to do a little introduction, and I'll let Haben have the floor shortly. Eritrean Healthcare Professional Network, also known as EHPN. Mission statement is to unite and mobilize Eritrean medical professionals of various healthcare fields for the purpose of improving the healthcare and well-being of Eritreans around the world. We aspire to bring hope and relief and providing web-based medical information, and by rendering various medical services and resources with a focus on unprivileged Eritreans around the world. Today's topic is very important in our field, and that's why we brought Haben. So Haben, introduce yourself. I will give the floor to you.
Thank you for the warm welcome. Hello, everyone. This is Haben speaking, and I'm going to start by explaining communication. As you heard, I'm deafblind. I have limited vision and hearing. So I'm not hearing Luan or others on the Zoom. I am getting the information through Braille. And here is the device. I'm holding it up. There's Braille along the bottom. And I run my fingers over the dots to feel the letters, and we're getting the words through Braille. So you'll notice a delay between when someone says something and when I respond, because the communication's coming through. Patience is part of inclusion. Patience, because everyone has different communication styles. Everyone has different needs, and we need to be able to meet people where they are. There are still people who say, oh, that's different. That takes too long. She's weird. There's still a lot of that in our communities. And that makes it really hard for people who are deaf or have other disabilities and need to get access to healthcare. So even though hospitals and healthcare centers can be incredibly busy, try to take time to meet people where they are. Some people will need different communication styles. Maybe they need you to write something down. Maybe they need you to bring an interpreter in to use sign language. There are different kinds of sign languages. American Sign Language, Ethiopian Sign Language, different sign languages in the Eritrean community. So there needs to be time to talk about communication. What's the best system for us to use? What's the best language for us to use? And let's find and use the tools or interpreters that'll help us make the conversations possible. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I had access to tools, Braille, computer devices. I learned to work with a guide dog. Behind me on screen is my guide dog. His name is Milo. And he lets me know when there are stairs, when we get to the end of the sidewalk, if there are obstacles on the path. So he's had that training and he helps me navigate around spaces. I still get people who say, you can't bring the dog into this taxi or into this restaurant or into a healthcare facility. But in the United States, everywhere the public can go, guide dogs can go. There are exceptions for certain parts of the healthcare facility that are not open to the public. For example, where surgery is happening, actively happening, sometimes a guide dog is not brought in there and they stay in the waiting room or they stay in another part of the facility. But for the most part, the healthcare facility should be welcoming patients with guide dogs. And I know this is an international group. There are also laws protecting guide dogs and service dogs in other countries. So that's another thing to keep in mind. There's so many pieces to making healthcare more accessible for disabled people. I want to be able to answer some of the questions people have about disability and healthcare. So if you have questions and are curious about something, you're welcome to send it in through the chat feature or the Q&A feature on Zoom, or if you're on Facebook, you can send it in through a comment on Facebook. Luan, are you able to see questions coming in?
I don't yet, but we can set, I do have a couple of questions so that we can probably, until the question comes in, we can start with that.
Go for it.
Okay.
Luam, before you go to the questions, I have a question for you, Haben. This is Elsa speaking. This is regarding Milo. So is he hypoallergenic? How do you deal with people who are allergic to dogs when you take him with you?
Excellent question. He is not a hypoallergenic dog. So if people have allergies, and you know what? I have friends with allergies, with dog allergies, and we just navigate around those situations. So for example, if we're gonna meet up, we try to meet up outside where there's better air circulation. And I do my best to keep my dog as far away from the person as possible. If you have someone with allergies and you have someone with a service dog, both of their needs matter. And you just negotiate the situation to meet both of their needs. Can you have them on opposite sides of the waiting room? Can you open windows so there's better circulation? Can you move them into different waiting rooms? So everyone's needs matter. And yes, sometimes there are conflicts and you just shift furniture or adjust things to meet everyone's needs.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Let me start out with the questions until the questions comes in. My question is if you can explain what disability is.
Yeah, definitely. So there are lots of different words out there. There's differently abled, there's special needs, there's handicapped. And while those words are in circulation, most disabled people especially activists and advocates for disability rights, prefer the word disabled. It's more direct. And also it reflects the social model of disability rather than the medical model. The medical model says disabled people are broken. And within the healthcare space, if you are treating a specific condition, you do your best to help and heal that specific condition. Sometimes bodies are just different. And at that point, we need to ensure that person's dignity and provide the accommodations and support so that that person can continue living their life with dignity and full respect. So at that point, they would learn Braille or sign language or use a wheelchair, whatever the supports they need. So the medical model says this person is broken, let's try to fix them. And the social model says all our bodies are different and we all deserve dignity and respect. We're not broken. We're just a different form of the human condition and the human experience. We're all humans and all deserve dignity and respect. So that's the social model of disability, and preferring the word disabled. Other words like special needs are awkward because it implies there are normal needs and there are extra, more cumbersome, more special needs. And splitting up the population like that is not helpful. That just continuous marginalization and pity. So extra words like differently abled, special needs actually perpetuate stigma. Disabled is more direct and honest. In certain situations, I can't do X, Y, Z. There's no point in trying to sugarcoat that. I can't drive cars. I'm not gonna pretend by using special words to imply that I can drive cars. Maybe one day in the future there will be autonomous vehicles, but right now I shouldn't be driving a car. So I have disabilities, I'm disabled. It doesn't mean I don't also have talents and skills and abilities. So that's the social model of disability. Good question, Luan.
I just wanted to start out with that so that we can kind of narrow our conversation. So the main reason that we have this forum is especially for Eritreans, Eritrean around the world. So what is your thought about Eritreans around the world? Would like to know about disability rights. And I know, as we all know, America have a Disability Act, and the rights are progressively improving. If you can talk about the Disability Act that we have in America compared to around the world. I see on Instagram, you travel a lot. So I would like to know the different experiences that you had traveling and the accesses that you had.
Every place has its strengths and its weaknesses. So the United States has the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it has a culture of complaining and bringing up problems and wanting those problems addressed. And the disability community has benefited from that. So there are more complaints about access barriers and wanting them fixed. And as a result, we've had more access barriers fixed. And there's more inclusion, physical and digital and social inclusion compared to a lot of other places. That is the gift of the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's still problems in the United States, so many problems. The metro system is very, very difficult for a lot of people with mobility disabilities who use wheelchairs and other mobility devices. There are lots of stations where the elevators are broken or there are no elevators at all. And that's not right. That's still an ongoing problem in the United States. I went to Singapore, and in Singapore, all the metro stations were accessible. And it was one of the most accessible, probably the most accessible metro system that I've ever encountered. So different places excel at different things. Other places do better. Other places struggle with things. Access to healthcare is a huge problem in the United States, and other countries are doing that much better than we are.
Thank you, Haben. I do see a comment on Facebook from Rahwa. Says that you are a very strong and beautiful woman. I hope you will work together with Eritrean blind community and share your thoughts.
So I have visited Eritrea in the past, and I remember visiting with the blind community. There's the Abra Bata School for the Blind in Asmara, and they have a remarkable library with lots of Braille books. They were in English Braille. There were also some books in Tigrinya Braille. I could only read English Braille, so I was able to meet with the students and read with the books. I've also donated some books there. So then there are also Eritreans who are blind in the diaspora, and they connect, share resources, help each other out. So those are some of the things that have been happening.
Thank you. That's the only question that we have on Facebook, so I'll continue. I do have a lot of questions I did prepare. As the question comes in, I'll continue to the next question. So according to a study by WHO in 2014 in Geneva, Disability and Rehabilitation Team, the primary cause of disability in Eritrea, they listed as war, disease, aging, accidents, congenital defects, psychiatric disorders, common disability. They do list a lot. Yeah, you have mentioned, I believe in your books and different speeches that you have given about your brother Muse, who grew up in Eritrea until the age 12 and cannot access the education system. As a disability rights advocate, how can we Eritrean work to increase access in Eritrea or in the diaspora or refugees to increase their access? Because education is leads to liberty. So how can we as a community help in this topic?
So it's really important to be able to communicate with the disabled people in Eritrea and ask, what do you need? I could guess what people need, but that's how problems happen, when you assume what people need rather than asking them, what do you need? And then working to meet that need. So communication channels need to be opened with disabled schools and organizations in Eritrea to ask, what do you need? And there needs to be a way to get books and tools and services to the community.
Thank you, Haben. The other question that I have is about ableism and having in our community, especially. If you can talk about it a little bit.
Absolutely. So ableism is the concept of assuming that there is a perfect human with no challenges, no weaknesses at all. And disabled people are considered inferior to non-disabled people within the concept of ableism. And there are so many people who just believe ableism is fact. They think, of course, you should not hire a disabled person. Of course, a disabled person can't work as a doctor or a nurse or go to school. That is ableism. It's assuming that disabled people can't do things. So it is very widespread, and we need people to recognize and notice ableism when it's happening. So if you catch yourself thinking, oh, a disabled person can't do this, talk to them and ask, what are the tools and strategies you need to have this done? Maybe they could read a book if it's in Braille, or if it's in an accessible digital format, or if it's an audiobook. So it's really important to have questions of how can we make this work? And notice when ableism is popping up. So there are psychiatric non-apparent disabilities, and with some psychiatric disabilities, people need to choose whether to tell and share that they are struggling or keep it hidden and stay silent about their struggles. Ableism makes it very difficult for people to share, because ableism is this idea that if you have a challenge, you're less worthy, you're not valuable. Ableism is those harmful, poisonous, toxic ideas that impact our culture. So if we could address ableism, more people would feel comfortable saying, I'm having these internal struggles. I think I might have a non-apparent psychiatric disability. Can I get help? What are the resources out there? How can we make sure that people get therapy or counseling or medication for non-visible disabilities? Ableism is such a huge barrier for a lot of people getting the care they need. So if we could address ableism, more people would get care and our communities would be stronger as a whole.
Thank you, Haben. I will, thank you very much. That was a nice explanation, and I did learn a lot from your book. And what we think as a community is a positive way of looking at things, but it could be actually harmful or a negative connotation. I will give time if anybody wants to ask question live. We can unmute. For those of you who are on Zoom, you just can raise your hand and I'll unmute. At any time you can raise your hands and we'll unmute you.
I'm curious if there's anyone in this group who's working to increase mental health care for Eritreans. Who's working on that? Are there any online resources that people could reach out to so they can access these supports?
Dr. Zarabruk, he is our EHPN member, and he's also a psychiatrist. I'll unmute him.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Haben, for your wonderful explanation. Thank you, Loam. Thank you all. My question is, how was the impact of your parents on your way till now? What do you think, which it impacts to know or to have people around you and the way they react and the way they assist you? Thank you. Maybe Luam would clarify my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zarabruk. Was it clear? I don't think I need to clarify it.
Yes, I think I got it.
Okay.
So you're right that our community impacts us. The family members around us, how they react to our struggles impacts how we develop as disabled kids and disabled adults. Some people are born with disabilities and have childhoods with disabilities. Others develop it later in life. And there are so many unknowns. A lot of people have fear, and that fear can hold a lot of people back, unfortunately. So my family had to struggle with being protective and wanting to keep me safe. No, don't do that. That's dangerous. And also saying, you can do anything you want. Anything's possible. So it was those two. And I think a lot of families also experience different combinations of saying, no, you can't do that. That's dangerous. That's not safe. And oh yes, anything is possible. What made a really big difference is that I grew up in a community in the San Francisco Bay Area that had the answers to many questions. So if you asked me as a child, how does a blind person read? I would have said, I don't know, I have no idea. But I had access to a community in the schools that says, let's teach them Braille, let's use these technologies. So there were people to help answer the questions of how would this be possible? And I received a lot of training, how to use a white cane, how to navigate streets, how to take the bus and metro. So that was training that was provided. That is actually not normal in a lot of communities. A lot of places in the United States, disabled kids and adults don't receive that kind of training. How to use a white cane, how to read Braille, how to ask for help when you need help. There aren't experts in a lot of communities to help teach that. And that's also very true in Eritrea. There's a lack of experts who can teach Braille and cane travel. So family supports combined with experts with specialized knowledge on the specific disability, that those two need to work together.
Thank you, Haben. You mentioned about having access for mental health, if I'm correct, right? Earlier, before Dr. Zarabruk asked.
Yes, and I think there is not enough access to mental health for Eritreans in Eritrea and Eritreans in the diaspora. And that is something I wish more people would work on. Let's increase access to mental health. It's really, really hard to ask for help if you're struggling. And then some people get up the courage to ask for help, and there's no help available. So if we could fill that gap where there isn't help available, or people don't know how or where it is. That would make a huge difference for a lot of people.
Thank you, Haben. One of the things that Eritrean, the EHPN does is a series of education about mental health with different topics. Dr. Zarabruk is one of our clinicians that does it online. We don't do it as often because it's a very impactful live webinars. But I think also education, like you said, we do not have access at all compared to what's needed. But we'll try our best in getting more access and help webinars. Thank you for bringing it up. It's very important. And
in the webinars you mentioned, do you have Eritreans with psychiatric disabilities sharing their experiences? So someone struggling with depression, talking about how they get help, or someone with schizophrenia, talking about what their experiences are like and what helps them. Do you have people with these experiences sharing on the webinar?
We have not had yet, but this is one of the things that we can improve in being more inclusive and having them share their experience, because it will make a difference, I believe, to get that feedback on the other end. So I will talk to especially Dr. Zarabruk and Dr. Elsa. I'll give her the floor. She's raising her hand to ask questions, but I will make sure that we bring this up in our next webinar. Go ahead, Dr. Elsa.
Yeah, thank you, Luam. I just want to add to what you have been saying, Luam. We have a mental health team in EHPN Haben. Dr. Zarabruk, he was humble, but he's our psychiatric lead doctor. Yes, I would like to mention two things. During the webinars, people, they send their messages, but they are not open to talk. We have been asked that if we could give individual therapies, things like that. Dr. Zarabruk has been dealing with it, right, Luam?
And I'm going to have Dr. Zarabruk also
on that, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we have contacts with refugees in Libya. We don't, it's a sensitive issue. We don't want to say a whole lot, but yes, we do try as much as we can, and the same thing with other refugee camps in other parts of the world. But Dr. Zarabruk can comment on that himself. He does a lot on his own as well. We are very fortunate to have him in EHPN. We don't, appreciate him enough by words, but he's our strong hold here.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Elsa. It is really tricky, especially when wanting to protect refugees, but also want to make sure they have space to talk and be heard. Witnessing someone's struggles is very, very powerful. Even if you don't have the answers, just being present and witnessing and listening to what someone's going through is very powerful. And letting people know that those services are there and how to reach those services is life-changing for a lot of people. So I'm glad we have people here helping with that, and thank you for sharing that.
If Dr. Zarabruk is around, he can comment more on that.
I'll give him the floor. Go ahead, Dr. Zaraberg.
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me for my pronunciation. English is not my everyday language. We are, as Dr. Elsa said, we are trying on different levels to reach out the needy people in terms of mental health. You know, since I am working on that since more than 10 years, giving seminars for concerned people, social workers who assist our people in the communities. It is fruitful, but our people, before 20 or 30 years in Europe or America, speaking about mental health was not that much usual. It was a taboo. It is not common to speak about your mental situation with people who you don't know. And it is in our communities very tough to speak out, and it is one of the dilemmas with which we have to work with, you know. So we are trying. For example, before a month or 1.5, there was a social media program with one of the media outlets. Around, I think 55 or something, 55,000 people have seen that till today, 55,000. So you see there is an interest to hear, and the outcome was that so many people want to contact you directly. For example, the experts in EHPN or somewhere else, they want to bring up their individual situation to have a consulting. So you cannot match this demand on this level. So we have to see for ways how to reach out and assist the people on their personal level, you know, for their personal situation. But it is difficult, but we don't give up. Thank you very much.
You're right, it is a huge challenge to meet the demand when there are thousands of people who need support, and therapy are one idea, which you may already be working on, is to have a program of training more people to be able to provide these services virtually, so that it's not just one person, but hundreds of people supporting others. Maybe that's a program EHPN could start.
Yes, it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zarabruk. I do have one new question on Zoom, and I will give you a space, Eden. On Zoom chat, there is Aman says, thank you, Haben, so much for your wonderful presentation. You are such an inspiration. We have many immigrants who are in Eritrean veterans who suffer injuries related to the war. Many of them have disabilities, but they do not know services available in the US. How do we increase awareness they can receive services they need?
So for many physical disabilities, from blindness or mobility disabilities, one can do rehabilitation training to learn to use different tools or do things differently so that you could have greater freedom and mobility within the world. So it might be you learning to use mobility tools like wheelchairs or walkers, or learning to use a cane, or training with a guide dog, or learning to use Braille. Throughout the US, And I know other places too. There are disability centers where there are people who can help answer these questions and connect you to the agencies that could help provide these services.
Is it possible, Haben, if you can share with us so that we can post it as with this video, as if people are engaged, interested? Is there a resource or websites that we can attach?
I'm not sure because it's different for so many different disabilities and different organizations for different disabilities. So in the field of employment, there's one resource where you can go to, you can enter the disability you're curious about, and it'll give you a list of strategies and accommodations that are common for people with that disability. And the resource is askjan.org, askjan.org.
Thank you. You didn't think I was going to ask you right away. Thank you. I'll post this.
So if you're wondering how someone with a specific disability, including psychiatric disabilities, would be able to do a job or task, you can check on there. It's not a comprehensive, it doesn't have every answer, but it's a really good starting point.
Thank you, Haben. Eden, you can go ahead and take the floor.
Thank you, Laura. Haben, thank you so much. It's very inspirational. The discussion is amazing. And you mentioned earlier about personal witness and testimonies of some people is very powerful. And I agree with you. And as you know, in our culture, Eritrean, it's kind of very difficult to, people to say it. They have sickness, even some just chronic, especially mental illness. Of course, obvious, some of the children, they have some problems. And sometimes it gets delayed to get help. And I kind of, try to ask you from your perspective, from your parents, how they supported you, helped you in the early stage to get all the assistance and accesses. And how can we try to kind of, encourage other people, or you can give us a tip to do some personal testimonies, because they are powerful. Somebody who recovered or who get help in mental illness or other kind of conditions, it's very powerful for other people to listen and to really kind of seek help. And that was the most important in our community. We need to kind of engage and bring it, because so far it's very difficult to get some people go out and speak up how they get help.
Excellent point. So when I was growing up, the internet as it existed today was not really there. So there's so many more tools now. And there are lots of disabled people, including those with psychiatric disabilities, who have written about their spirit experiences or shared on YouTube videos of their experiences. And if you are a parent of a disabled child, or you are an adult who's recently developed a disability, or have a friend or family member who recently developed a disability, it can be really helpful to take time to look up and research other people with that disability and see how are they living their lives, what strategies are they using, what resources are available, So for parents, it really helps to be able to see adults with the disability so that they can imagine futures for their own children with disabilities.
Thank you, Haben. I don't see any questions on Facebook. I will give another chance to somebody in Zoom if anybody wants to ask. If not, I do have a lot of questions, so I'll go ahead and ask my questions. All right, until somebody asks, you do talk about a lot about your experience and how you were motivated and taking your role currently. That is the cafeteria story. For a lot of Eritreans, you do talk about your parents also, how they came to America and go through all the struggles and adjust to the new home here in America. So we do have a lot of Eritreans who are going through their own struggles. It doesn't have to be any type of disability, but adjusting to the new home, to the new place. What are some of the things that you advise in how they get inspired, or like you, or to do something to stand up for their rights? How do you encourage Eritreans currently who are out of Eritrea in a refugee camp, or in America, Europe, or anywhere else in the world?
So activism is often framed as doing big, courageous things, but it really starts with the small things. So look around your own home, your own community. What are the challenges you see? Do one step to address those challenges. My activism started out with something small, issues at my school, wanting to fix those issues. And there were, at the time, so many problems around the world. And there would be so many people who would say, oh, just deal with it. It's just a small thing, just put up with it. If I continued putting up with it, the next student who comes after me is also going to have to put up with it. So when you take the time to address a small barrier, you're helping all the other people who come after you and are also going to encounter that barrier. So there are small barriers in our communities that we just put up with. Examine them. Check around your communities for those small barriers. And when you address it, you build up skills to tackle the larger obstacles.
Thank you, Haben. About innovation, you are big in technology, and if you can, you have shared some of the technology that you use, that you are always looking for something creative and making things better. And do you work on this, or do you talk to people who are innovative, or if they have any new ideas? Are you usually looking for new ideas, or how do you because some of the things that I have learned from the things that you use, as small as the computer tablet that you use with Obama, and the different things that you use day to day, how do you come up with it? Or is there somebody that is constantly that you talk to get these things made, perhaps?
Oh, I do talk to a lot of tech companies and people working in tech. I think it's really important to have community, build community with people who share the same disability or share the same experience and talk to them. So you said there are a lot of people who are struggling because they've just moved to a new place. They're refugees. They're going to gain strength by building communities with others who've gone through similar struggles. And in the sharing and talking about the struggles, you eventually notice patterns and get ideas for solutions for some of the problems. So a lot of the innovation happens through conversations with people with shared interests, shared disabilities, who are coming up with solutions.
Thank you, Haben. I'm checking if there's any questions on Zoom or Facebook. I don't see a whole lot.
So Haben, we have 13 people on Zoom and about 15 people on Facebook.
I do think that it can be hard to ask questions about disability because there's still so much shame and fear around disability in the Eritrean communities. And it's not just the Eritrean communities, there's so many other communities that also struggle with difference and admitting to struggling with something. And I chose to write my book and talk about blindness and deafness and other disabilities because I know by talking and being public, it's going to make it easier for other people to admit to themselves and their loved ones that they're struggling and start to seek help. So talking about this is still hard for a lot of people. I understand that. I know what that's like. We can start to create more tools, more solutions for more Eritreans to share what they're struggling with, and in turn, help other people also admit they're struggling and then seek help, whether it's tools or medication to address those struggles.
Thank you, Haben. I do have a question for you. My husband asked me to ask you, how is your Tigrinya?
My Tigrinya is not very good. I think it's mostly because I'm deaf and it's hard for me to hear other people speaking. So I mostly ended up learning to speak through the written word. And I've only learned English Braille, not Tigrinya Braille, though I do know Tigrinya Braille exists.
Thank you. What do you like to do when you're when on your own time? What makes you, when you want to have fun, what do you do? I know you like dancing.
I do like dancing. I also like being in nature. So on social media, I share lots of photos of me being out in nature. It's fun, especially when you spend a lot of time in front of a computer. It's nice to be out in the world and experience time in nature.
How did you learn to dance? I know you said that, you mentioned that in the book, but I wanna, if you can explain how you learned to dance for our audience, in case anybody have questions about that.
So I learned from a blind dance instructor So when I was a kid, I met a blind dance instructor, and it's very, very moving to be able to meet an adult with a similar disability when you are a child with a disability, which is why it's really helpful to build these communities where people could share their experiences and help share solutions and tools out there. So the blind dance instructor showed me hands-on what the movement was, the foot movement, and staying in sync with the music. And from then on, I continued taking dance classes.
And how about the beats? How do you move with the beats? How do you feel the beats?
I do partner dances. So swing, salsa, dances where people are physically connected. That way I can feel through their hands and shoulders the beat. Dances where people are not touching, those are harder for me, and I don't really like those dances.
Thank you. For those of you who are wondering, she does share a lot about her experiences and her experiences in Eritrea and her experiences going through her college time, school, growing up. She does share a lot. It is very, you can relate a lot in a lot of ways because if it's, you know, the evolving part is very interesting in her book. So I do recommend to go read her book. It is English. So for hopefully we can translate somewhere in the future for our people. That's one of the most interesting book I have read also. I do see a comment on Facebook. I think it's again from Rahwa. She says that we should find a way to spread the awareness that people with disabilities, the families of people with disabilities, and for example, people with mental health issues needs to be heard and deserve to be equal in Eritrea and also in diaspora.
Yes, I very much agree with that. We need to get rid of the stigma, and people with mental health struggles should be treated with respect and dignity and get the support and respect they deserve. And in terms of my book, there are lots of stories from Eritrea because my family would go to Eritrea during the summer. So I spent quite a bit of time there and share some of those stories in the book. The book is also in audiobook format. I read it out loud in the audiobook. So if you prefer listening, or if it's easier for you to understand English, if it's spoken rather than written, that might be helpful. Oh, and one other thing. If you are in Africa, some of the US embassies have the book in the library. So that's another way to access it is through embassy libraries.
Thank you, Haben. There is, somebody has raised their hands. Elizabeth Estefanos, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. You can go ahead and ask.
Thank you. Hi, Haben. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us here. I have a question. When you were in college at Harvard, what was your experience with the disability services at a college level?
I went to college at Lewis and Clark in Portland, Oregon, and then Harvard was law school. They were very, very supportive, the Disability Services Program. And I was lucky. That is not normal. so many other colleges, their disability offices discourage students. One college I was looking at, they told me, you know, we don't have Braille. How are you going to do your classes without Braille? And you know, it snows in the winter. How are you going to get to your classes if there's snow? Instead of working with me and supporting me, they were telling me, discouraging me from coming to that college. And I didn't go there.
Mm.
So when disability services at a college are helpful and supported, it's fantastic. It gives the student space to try different tools. Maybe the student doesn't know what tools they need. So they need the opportunity to try different tools and find out what works for them. Some blind students love Braille. Some don't know how to read Braille and prefer to listen to books. So give people tools and let them try out different solutions until they find what works.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Was that answered?
Yes, thank you, Luam.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Haben.
Somebody on Zoom says, thank you so much, Haben and EHPN for doing this, for sharing your thoughts and experiences, very educational. We do have another question on Facebook. Sienna Jacob states, how can people better allies to be, how can people be better allies to people with disabilities?
Excellent question. In the Eritrean community, I think it would help if non-disabled and also disabled friends and family would ask, what do we need to be more inclusive? So if there's a disabled person at your church, ask, what do we need to do to make this church more accessible? You may need to ask more than once, because a lot of us struggle with being different. There's the fear of being a burden on a community. So some people, if you ask them what they need, they'll say, oh, nothing, don't worry about it, everything's fine. Because they're afraid of inconveniencing or burdening the community. So be patient. Everyone's still struggling and figuring things out. Ask maybe more than once, what do I need to do to be more inclusive? Is there anything we should change at the church, at the club, at the community center to make this more accessible? And then listen. And also, if you are the leader at the church or the community center, designate time to research this issue. So look up standards for physical spaces, or look up what other disabled inclusive centers are doing, and research those solutions they're using and plan to implement those solutions at your own space. If you are in a position of power and you are the leader, part of leadership is doing this work, finding out what are the barriers. How do I remove those barriers? Make that part of your work.
Thank you, Haben. I think this question is specifically to here in America for the disability rights, especially when you're talking on specifically in Harvard cafeteria. What was it in Harvard cafeteria? The cafeteria, your first challenge that you had at school to get the menu in accessible format. You said there that it is a right, not an accommodation. So if you can explain to healthcare professionals that providing healthcare it's the right that is, if you can explain a little bit on having accessibility for their clients or patients.
So healthcare professionals should adopt the environment or policies to meet the needs of disabled patients. If you have a patient who uses a wheelchair and your room, your office is not accessible, move to a different office, make plans to shift to a different space, or move the furniture around so the person can come in and get the treatment they need. So adapt policies, furniture, practices, so that when you have disabled clients, their health also matters and they also get the treatment they need. There are still so many healthcare facilities that turn disabled people away. They refuse to hire interpreters. That's terrifying. That's people's lives at risk. And we've seen a lot of that during the pandemic. There's also trainings various health organizations provide to be more disability inclusive. Ask your organization to provide that training so that the next time you have a disabled client comes in, you know the resources in place, you know how to bring in a sign language interpreter, or you know where the accessible machines are so that you can move and adjust to meet the client's needs.
Thank you. Okay, let me see. Dr. Zarabik said, thank you, dear Haben, for your inspiring and encouraging presentation and very useful input. Thank you so much, dear Luan. All right, I think we do have 15 more minutes in our time. Haben, I will give you time if you want to provide a message to our community, to healthcare providers, healthcare professionals, or in general to Eritrean community on this topic today.
If you felt inspired by the conversation today, allow that inspiration to move into action. Think about the barriers at your healthcare center and plan to help remove those barriers so that our communities can be more inclusive. So if you're the leader, take time to research and read the policies. If you know who the leaders are, ask them, are we accessible to disabled patients? What do I need to know and what do I need to do to make this center more accessible to disabled patients? So there are a lot of more conversations that need to happen to identify the barriers and remove the barriers.
Thank you, Haben. I think we have one question on Zoom. Thank you, Haben. You are pretty brave, committed, and inspirational. I really admire your hair deeds. I would like to ask you if you have a picture of Eritrea and Eritreans, and if you can compare it with this time. Thank you.
Luan, can you help understand the question? It sounds like something to do with a picture of Eritrea.
Yes, Tesfai, do you want to come ask this question? I can unmute you. Okay, I really admire your hard deeds. I would like to ask you if you have a picture of Eritrea and Eritreans, and if you can compare it with this time. Oh, her childhood picture. Okay, so I believe he's asking your childhood picture.
You know,
You envision Eritrea? That's fine.
Hello.
so I went to Eritrea.
Haven't, Tesfai is unmuted, sorry. Thank you, Tesfai, sorry, we didn't mean to have you come on live, but if you can explain the question.
Sorry, I am a little bit busy at writing here. I just want to add her childhood picture about Eritrea, and if he had, I think he was grown up in Sudan. If I am right, or I think she has a picture of Eritrea when he was a child, and if he can compare it now with the childhood picture, if she can have something
Okay,
in mind.
Okay, I understand Tesfai now. I think you understood the
So I
question.
have not been to Eritrea as an adult. I only went to Eritrea as a child, and consequently the stories about Eritrea in my book are from a child's perspective, because that is the Eritrea I experienced when I was there. So I can't compare it from back then to now.
All right. Thank you, Haben. I think the in her book, from what I understood in your book, it was your experiences and how she talked about in her experiences when she was in Eritrea as a child. And I think that's why you asked if she was in Sudan. I don't believe, Haben, were you in Sudan?
No, I've never been to Sudan.
Okay.
I've been to Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Mali. That's all I've visited in Africa.
Okay, yes. I think that answers it. I think he wanted to know the picture that you have about Eritrea, or the imagination that you had about Eritrea. So thank you for answering that, Haben. We do have a lot of positive thank yous on Facebook, on Zoom too. I just want to ask you one last question, Haben. What are you doing currently as as a career? I know you graduated Harvard Law School, but what are you doing currently?
I am continuing to advocate for disability rights. So there are so many barriers impacting disabled people. My specific special interest is in tech and making sure tech is fully accessible, because we're building new tech now. And why exclude disabled people from our future? We need to include disabled people in our designs, in our tests, as we build new technologies for the future. So those are the conversations and the work that's happening now.
Thank you, Haben. I think that would come to our time. I really appreciate for joining us, and I hope this is not the last time we're going to see you here on our platform. We hope that you continue to come and support us and making a better space and help us with access. I do appreciate that taking your time today. If you guys want to follow Haben on her social media, we'll put it for you guys on the comment section. Thank you very much for your time, and everybody. We apologize that to majority of the time we do the presentation in Tigrinya. We do have a lot of international audience. Perhaps the English is probably the main deterrent from perhaps asking or participating. We'll try, and in the future when you come back, to be creative and be innovative in how we can be able to be more to get more participants and questions and to bring out also. I think that will be it for today. Thank you, Haben. I don't know if you have last words before we end our program.
I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity to be here and share. We can all make a difference in helping to make the Eritrean community more inclusive for disabled people, and creating spaces for disabled people to say, I'm struggling. Can I get help? What are the resources out there to ensure that I get the help I need? And this is a great organization for helping to get those resources out there. So thank you for having me. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you,
Haben.
All right, thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
نحن طرح مسيله نمو.
Do you want to stop recording?
Didn't I? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's